Here we have a 2005 Skoda Fabia. It's done roughly 82,000 miles and it's fitted with the 1.2 petrol engine. Previously this car went for an MOT and it was recommended that the front brake pads and discs would need replacing. So we're going to have a look at those today. But as we're going to be working on the braking system, I'm going to loosen this cap. You can just loosen it, leave it laying there, try not to drop it, or take it right off. I'll put it up there. Because if we do the pads, when we press the pistons back into the calipers, it will force the fluid up into the reservoir and more than likely trickle over the top. You can extract a little bit, but I'll just put some blue roll around there just in case. Main thing with brake fluid is if you spill any, make sure you've got some water and a soft cloth to hand to clean up, because it makes a brilliant paint stripper. Now, to replace discs and pads, we're going to have a few bits and pieces here, as you can see. Got a file and a wire brush here just for cleaning off any corrosion, surface rust on the caliper carrier. Got some emery paper and some wet and dry just for polishing up the sliders. Just a selection of screwdrivers there for pulling rubber boots back and easing the piston back in so you can get the caliper off. A hammer to loosen the brake discs, sometimes they can rust on. Got a Torx 30 bit there for undoing the grub screw that holds the disc in place. Got the breaker bar obviously with the 17mm socket to take the wheel bolts off. A pair of grips there to push the caliper pistons in. We've got some copper grease to use on the ears of the brake pads. A 6mm Allen key on a ratchet. Obviously you can use just a normal 6mm Allen key. And I've got a dead blow rubber hammer in case you need to tap anything. Don't want to be leaving any marks. Right, before you jack the car up or take it up on a ramp, it's a good idea to crack the wheel bolts loose. This has got steel wheels and just plastic wheel trims or hubcaps. I believe they're 17mm on this vehicle. I'm going to be doing the identical job on the other side, but we won't record that purely because it is identical to this side. And just be ready to catch the wheel. Sometimes they fall off, other times they need a bit of persuasion. They can corrode on there, but that one's loose. Right, the wheel off. Yeah, there is quite a lip on those discs actually. Not so much on the outside, but on the inside there is. What I'll do, I'll turn it round. Oh. And you can see in the middle here, you can see your brake disc there. I'll turn that. That part is the metal backing of the brake pad. So between this and the disc is what's left on the brake pad. I'd say it's probably about half worn. So it's not in desperate need of changing, but the discs are quite heavily scored or worn. Right, I'm going to start by removing this caliper. It's got two bolts, which are also sliders, here and here, and they are 6mm Allen key. Just give that a little tap. Exactly the same down the bottom, another 6mm Allen key bolt. Quite a bit of mud in there actually. Oh, here it comes. You can see the bottom one is different to the top one, I think, unless it's just... Oh yeah, I'll give that a clean up. It's a bit corroded and muddy. So I'll grab a screwdriver. Should be able to lever this across, which in turn pushes the piston in a little bit. You could probably lever it from numerous little points there or down here, but that's gone enough now, I think, that piston. Now these pads, you can see you've got a clip here, which should just, yeah, you can release them. Just comes out the piston. Get that one out first. That's it. And I'll grab my grips and we'll push this piston back in next. Sometimes a good idea, before you push the piston back in, just have a little look underneath this rubber boot, but be very careful. You don't want to pierce it. Just make sure that the piston isn't corroded. It should be nice and clean and shiny like that one is, so that's good. When these boots split, moisture can get in and it sits in there and corrodes the piston, which stops it from returning properly into its housing. But as you can see, that one goes in nice and smoothly. I'm using my big grips. You can get piston wind back tools as well, or you could use a G-clamp or even a screwdriver like I was doing earlier, just to push it back a little bit. So I want to get these out and give them a clean up. So I need to remember that that one is at the top here. That's got a separate little tube there. This one is all one piece at the bottom. Yeah. So we'll give these a clean up with some wet and dry now. So this one, I don't think it's critical, the head of the bolt here, but I'm going to give it a little go over with some quite coarse emery. Just get some of that muck off. It's a bit better, a bit smoother. And I've got a bit of wet and dry there, which I'm going to use like WD-40 or duck oil. It didn't really need much cleaning. It's mainly this tube part that needs to be nice and shiny. A little bit more there. That's it. Lovely. Not too bad, but give it a polish anyway. Well, that should do nicely. I'll leave those there. We'll come back to those in a bit. But I think we'll get the brake disc off next. Now, as you can see there, there's a little grub screw which just holds the disc in place when you're dismantling or assembling. It's Torx 30 by the look of it. So I've got to try and undo that. I'm going to give it a tap with a hammer first, just to hopefully loosen it. I've got a Torx 30 bit in my gun. Hopefully that'll move it. Yeah, wasn't too tight. It's going to fall out. There we go, one brake disc. You can see the lip on there now. Right, now I'm going to have a go at cleaning this carrier here. You can see it's quite muddy and a little bit of corrosion. I've got an old file. I'm not looking to take any thickness off the metal, but I just find that it's good for removing surface rust and muck before I brush it off. So the brake pad ears run on this surface, so you don't want them sticking. As with all parts for your car, when you go to your outlet or the dealer that you use, make sure you've got your registration number, and they'll be able to recommend a brand for your particular car. As with all things, depending on what brand name you go for, prices can vary quite a bit. I've gone for a kind of mid-range, more towards the budget end of things, on pads and discs for this one. and you should be able to get those for around about £100. Discs and pads. Right, I think that's most of the surface stuff off. I'm just going to grab a wire brush. Might be a little bit dusty. There. That should do the job. Right, so here's a new disc. As you can see, it's got a layer of silver paint on it to protect it from corroding just while it's in its packaging. Some brake discs, they just have like an oily coating which you'd need to clean off with brake cleaner and a cloth. But these ones that are painted actually says in the instructions not to clean it off, just to fit them. The first few times when you use the brakes, it'll sound a little bit harsh, but the pads actually polish all of that off quite nicely. So that is purely just there to hold the disc in place while you're working on it. Once the wheel's on, that'll clamp it up tight. Okay, next we'll get the new pads and fit those. I've already checked inside these bits where the sliders go, they're nice and clean. So we'll grab the brake pads and put those in next. Right, as you can see, the pads are different, they're not the same. The shape of them. So this one here, you can see the round ring where that's been in the piston side of the caliper. So that's this one, which is slightly wider. I think we'll start by putting this outer one in first. Which should slide down and in. That's it. Yeah, so the ear slides down into, there's a tiny little slot there. And there. And the inner one should just clip into the piston. That's it. Right, I'll just make sure this goes on okay, and then we'll grease the pads. Yeah, as you can see, the pad comes this side, and that little lug on the caliper goes on the other side. That looks like that'll work nicely. So normally I'd put grease on the pads first, but being as this one's a little bit fiddly, I decided to do it afterwards. Just a little bit, that's all it needs. Same on both sides. That's it. Oh. And they're in. So next we'll, don't look like it's, oh no, that's all right. We'll get the bolts in next and bolt it up. So I was just thinking that doesn't look quite right, that gap there, whereas this one's snug. The caliper is on okay, but looking at the other side, which I haven't dismantled yet, You can see it's the same, so that is right. The outer pad fits nice and snug, but the inner one has got a little gap. I'm just going to put a light smear of grease on these sliders. So that's the longer one which went in the top. And this one which goes in the bottom. Hopefully that'll stop any corrosion taking place. As you can imagine, it's a little bit open to the elements being down there like that. Seem to have lost my Allen key. Ah, there it is. Right, let's see if we can get these bolts started. If I come around that side, see what I'm doing. Oh, that's a bit broken. Now that one doesn't seem to want to line up. I'll grab my rubber hammer, give that a little tap. No, I can't see what's going on in there. Ah, that was it. That pad is quite a tight fit on the caliper. That's it, we're there now. Just nip these up. So looking back, might have been an idea to take a file to these little tiny grooves here, top and bottom, that the ears slide into. They don't have to move freely. The important part is that they move freely on here, which I've cleaned and greased the inside of there. It's just a very snug fit in the caliper. Right, both of my bolts are now tight, they're nipped up. As with all fixings on cars, or anything really, bicycles, you'll always find a tightening torque. But you just got to be sensible about it and make sure you nip them up nice and tight, but don't overdo it, obviously. The little grub screw, that's also tight. So we'll go ahead and get this wheel back on. Right, I'll just grab my air gun. Right, I'll crack on and do exactly the same job on the other side, and then we'll drop it down and continue. Right, now it's back on the ground. Got my brake bar. Just going to check these are tight. That one was a bit loose. Wheel trim, you've got the little cutout there for the valve, so make sure that lines up. And that's that back on. Right, back under the bonnet, and as you can see the fluid leveler has come right up to the top and some's come out, soaked up in the blue roll there. Now, one of the most important parts of the job, always remember to pump the brake pedal when you've finished, because we've pushed the pistons right back in, and you'll probably find the first 1 or 2 times you press the pedal it'll just go straight to the floor. So you don't really want to be driving off and then having no brakes. So that pedal's pumped up hard now. I've got a little dropper here. I'm going to just extract a little bit of that fluid out. Use a turkey baster, whatever you've got to hand, really. I've only ever used this on brake fluid, so won't be any cross-contamination there. That should do. And pop that cap back on. I'll grab a bit of water just to rinse that off. Dilutes down nicely with a bit of water, wash it away. Just make sure you got the cap on, you don't want to be tipping any in there. That's it. So all that's left to do now, as with most of my jobs, I'll give it a little road test and make sure the brakes are functioning as they should do. And bear in mind, with these particular brake discs, they will sound a little bit harsh the first couple of times you use the brakes, where it's just scrubbing off the protective paint layer.